here. And oh, it's recording. We're good. I'm Laura Bell, and lots of people call me Lori. I'm the board president of 1,000 Friends. This is the board I've been serving on the longest. I've been on for about 19 years. I feel really strongly about supporting this organization. I just want to briefly go through the agenda. It looks like most people are muted. I was going to say mute yourself, but I think that most people already are muted. So if you have a question for any of the speakers, you can use the chat function to chat it, to type it in. You should be able to see there's like a more near the bottom of the screen with 3 dots. And if you click on that, there's a chat option, and then you should be able to type in a message, or you could also raise your hand. There's also a raise your hand function. And first, we're going to review activities from 2021. There will be a brief treasurer's report. And then we have 2 speakers. Allison Van Pelt will talk about the climate change work that the Metropolitan Planning Organization is doing to help communities in the Des Moines Metro. And there will be an opportunity to ask some questions about that. And our second speaker will be Cassandra Sonne from the University of Northern Iowa Center for Energy and Environmental Education to talk about a new statewide city sustainability program. So that also you'll have a chance to ask questions about it. I'm actually very excited to hear about that. We're hoping that that can be something that can be replicated in other parts of the state. So, and then toward the end, we're going to be talking about our goals and plans for this year. So year in review. Carrie, did you want me to go through this, or did you want to go through it?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we worked with 8 communities in the state around climate and sustainability. And obviously at the state level, it hasn't been a lot of climate action, but it's really encouraging to know that in several communities, including some growing communities, their citizens have been able to get things going with creating a climate and sustainability committee. So more than 300 Iowans were engaged in this work last year, and they focused on all kinds of different issues. So some of them very technical, stormwater rules, urban forest master plans, greenhouse gas emissions inventories. The city of Des Moines passed a 24/7 carbon-free electricity resolution, the climate resolutions. There were zoning changes. There were changes to comprehensive plans. So just all kinds of different work that these local communities, also supporting solar energy installation in some places. And these communities have to be working with city staff and city council members. So some of those people have also been champions for this work. And this is the kind of work that really doesn't get a lot of attention in the public space and the media. It's just not something that, but it can be really important working this kind of way, a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit below the radar. I mean, it's not that it's not publicly available, it's just that it doesn't get a lot of public attention. So we had another area of our work last year is the Best Development Awards. That's always one of my favorite events. And last year we had to move it virtual because of the coronavirus, but I think it still went well. It was well attended, and it was on it's available on YouTube. It's always exciting to see the before and after pictures of those. We helped drive the creation of this Resilient Iowa Communities program, which, as I mentioned, you're going to hear about a little bit from now. And we had also educational webinars and co-hosted 2 of those for city staff and planners. And another one, Carrie said, is going to be coming up on February 2nd. So really a lot happening, considering that last year, like it was a difficult year because of the pandemic in some ways, but still Carrie and our active volunteers were able to get a lot done. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone wanted to ask any questions about that before we move on to the treasurer's report. Okay, I don't see any, I'm looking, I don't see any questions at least I don't see any questions in the chat. So, and Carolyn said that she wasn't going to be on the video, but Carolyn, are you still okay to do the treasurer's report, the audio?
Carolyn asked if I would do it for her because she
Okay.
can't talk right now.
Okay. Sorry, I hope you feel better soon, Carolyn.
So I'm going to just go through this really quick. This first slide just shows a breakdown of the money that we have that comes in and kind of what percentage comes from what. So as you can see, we still have a vast majority of our money comes from individual donors. The next biggest pot is from grants. And then there's a smaller pot here that comes from some different miscellaneous sources. There's some business support. We also this past year got one of the payroll protection forgivable loans that fell into this pot also. Our budget, you know, we're a pretty small organization and 2020 really our budget went down quite a bit. 2021, we brought it back up. We're still not quite to where we were at before, but it's much better. But this also shows you for folks who've donated to the organization, really 91% of the money that comes in goes straight into program work. We have very little administrative costs. And so you can really be assured that any donation you make goes right into the work we're doing. And that's critical. As many of you know, we just finished up with our year-end appeal. And if I can change the slide, I just thought I'd give people an update on what happened for our year-end appeal. So we had 10 volunteers who worked for 4 days in a row, writing notes and stuffing envelopes for folks. So we truly appreciate those volunteers. We had 6 volunteers who forwarded emails and asked their friends and family to become members. We had 35 new members who joined from those 6 volunteers who recruited them. We had another 125 members that donated or renewed their membership. We raised over 22,000. So we didn't quite meet our goal, but it's still the biggest amount that we've raised in our year-end appeal yet. So that was a pretty big increase for us. So we really, truly appreciate everything that folks did for the year-end appeal. And I will stop sharing my screen now.
Can I want to jump in and just say something that since I've been on the board, 1,000 Friends of Iowa, we've always run a really lean operation, and we've always relied primarily on individual donors. And I want to say 15 years ago or so, there were more state-based groups working on land use issues around the country than there are today. And several of those groups were much more reliant on grants, and as a result of that, went under because they just didn't have the ability to keep themselves going. And you know, the grant world, it's always a little bit dicey. So I'm proud of the fact that 1,000 Friends has a base of individual donors, and that has kept us going where some of these other groups, it's not the easiest issue to raise money around land use. It's kind of a big issue and seems kind of vague to a lot of people, but in any case, it's very important. And so to those of you on this Zoom who have contributed individually, that's very important and it's very valued.
Thank you. Well, we will go ahead and jump right in with our first speaker. So our first speaker is Allison Van Pelt, who's the senior planner at the Des Moines Area MPO. And Allison we've worked a lot together through the sustainability task force in Des Moines. We've been the webinars we talked about for cities, we've been co-hosting with the MPO and co-producing. And I'm really pleased with how responsive the MPO has been to the local work that's been happening with residents pushing for sustainability and climate action. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison to talk about this work that they are doing. Allison, take it away.
Thanks. Are you seeing my presenter mode or the full screen?
Presenter mode.
Okay, sorry, I've been out since before Christmas. That better? Full screen now?
Yep.
So I think I need to kind of buff up on my Zoom skills all over again. But hello, everyone. My name is Allison Van Pelt. I am a senior planner at the Des Moines Area MPO. We'll get into what the MPO and things are in just a little bit. But thank you for having me. I always enjoy talking to this group. And just real quick, I'd like to give a quick shout out to 1000 Friends. I think Carrie has been an excellent resource. I've worked with Julia as well. I really am appreciative of this organization and all the work that they put in. And so at your annual meeting, kudos to you all and your efforts as well. So I wouldn't be able to get this far without partners like you guys. So I actually got to speak to this group in 2019. So since the last time we met, we discussed the major urban flooding that happened in 2018 that turned our river town into river streets as well. June 30th is an event that I think everybody remembers around the Des Moines Metro. And so that really helped us spur some action there. And just a shameless plug, if you weren't with us in 2019, please do check out raincampaign.org. It's one of the ways that we have decided to help combat a lot of this urban flooding, and that's by empowering homeowners, property owners, and the general public to be involved in stormwater management. We rely upon our local governments to do a lot, but there's not as much public land as there is private. And so last time we talked about that and how we were dealing with that. But since then, obviously we had COVID. So now we all say pre-COVID, post-COVID, all the jazz. But we've also had a derecho twice now. I'd be curious at the end how many people actually had heard of the word derecho before August 2020. I think I had only read about it in academic and research purposes. I've lived in Iowa my whole life, and now in 2 years we've had two. And the last one they even canceled school for in the afternoon. So this is a degree that things are kind of ramping up. We've also had warm summers, warm winters, we've had droughts and things like that. And so we can clearly see that climate is continually impacting us. And I think some of the things that are happening on the other side are we are setting ambitious goals. And I do think that a lot of that goes to folks like yourselves who will be part of an organization that helps facilitate conversations with local governments, but also influence some of the elected officials and things like that. Because without this push from in Des Moines, the task force, and in Polk County, CCI and partners of theirs, we really wouldn't be at this point. And so I, as a public employee, really am at the will of what my boards above me decide. And so having them take these steps allows me to take these steps. So again, thank you to all of you for any efforts that you've put in locally to make these movements as well. So really, we keep seeing that climate change is here. It is more frequent. We have more frequent storms, more intense storms. The impacts are more visible. We see it. I think, we had been all closed in 2020, and then the derecho hit, and I haven't seen it as many of my neighbors except on that day in the last couple of years. We really are seeing these things, the droughts coming through. We see the corn just lying dead or sad in the fields, and so it's becoming more crucial that local governments take action. But there's also, with that, there's also more involvement from folks like yourselves. So again, that involvement helps governments have acknowledgement of the issue, and then that creates the movement. And so that's what really helps drive my work, is that movement piece. I can see the storms and I can keep railing on about them, but I am what they say, kind of our boutique planner at the MPO. I deal with the sustainability issues, not reducing your commute time. So when we talk about climate change, I have had a passion for it since 7th grade. I actually wrote my "What do I want to be when I grew up?" as a climatologist. Turns out I'm really bad at physics, so that never panned out that I became a climatologist or a meteorologist. And so in planning, I get to still play with all these pieces and be a part of these conversations and things like that. But MPOs are different. So navigating how the MPO can get more involved in climate action and climate mitigation or adaptation or any of these things, I needed to decide how to maneuver this. So just for those, I see some of my partners on this call that are well aware of what an MPO is, but I always throw this slide into any presentation. So just so you know, any urban area over 50,000 has an MPO. And we really are a federal conduit for transportation dollars to come from the federal government through the state and to the region. And so we are to ensure that there's coordination, long-range planning, and one of those things is reducing traffic congestion. Little plug for DART. If you're in the metro area, you can throw your bike on DART's buses and do multimodal. Anyways, we'll get to that later. So really, we serve these 16 cities, 3 counties, as well as DART. And also I work with the Central Iowa Regional Transportation Planning Alliance. So there's lots of acronyms in my background. And that is a similar organization, but for all 8 counties in Central Iowa. So really a lot of my core work is right here in the metro, but also I do work in the counties surrounding us as well. But a lot of that is strictly transportation. And so how do I, as that kind of fringe planner, help to bring these things in? And there's been quite a few things that have happened through the MPO since my tenure that have helped me to get to this point. The first one was the Tomorrow Plan. In 2012, the MPO led a region-wide initiative to put the Tomorrow Plan together, and they call it Partnering for a Greener Greater Des Moines. That's wonderful. We now have Capitol Crossroads here in the metro. If you haven't heard of that, check it out. It's a regional initiative that's really trying to get the Tomorrow Plan into action at the regional level through collaboration. The second was the Water Trails Plan. So the Water Trails Plan actually opened up the MPO to doing some of the more fringe topics like this. Water trails can be classified as transportation. It actually received infrastructure and transportation dollars to do some of the preliminary work. And there's actually a grant going on right now that's out for bid to start activating these waterways. So it could be transportation. And so that helped open that door. The other big ones were the environmental justice. So MPOs are required to identify where there are disadvantaged populations within any region and make sure that we are accommodating those folks as well. Not everyone can drive. That is just how it is. It might be a health reason, a legal reason, a social reason, any of the above, but many people can't drive. And so understanding who they are, where they are, that can be fluid too. Talk to many practitioners and you'll probably get 4 different definitions of environmental justice. But our report is really from the transportation system perspective. How does our transportation system exacerbate or lessen injustices that are out there and disadvantages? And then lastly, the Polk County Hazard Mitigation Plan was drafted by MPO staff and led by me in 2019. And that was one of the big pieces where I excitedly, as a West Des Moines native, I was really excited because in that document, we got to add a section literally specifically about climate change and how it would exacerbate these issues. It's not a huge piece, but every community in our county has now acknowledged that climate change is impacting us through that document. And that's personally a big win. I do think that hazard mitigation and climate action can really go hand in hand in a lot of cases. But I do think that, having that and having people acknowledge it, that these incidents keep happening, and then supporting things like the RAIN campaign has really led me to get to the place where I am as a MPO planner to provide other tools and start working on climate action. So I have to do it strategically, right? I have 3 boards with people from elected officials from 16 different governments helping determine what I can and can't do. And so I went out there and tried to figure out my best tactic on how to get this better incorporated into my work program. And so I actually found an EPA report from, I believe it's 2012, might even be 2013. However, earlier in the 2010s, EPA said, here are 9 things that Iowa should be doing. 1, local governments are at the forefront. Land use is a primary determinant for these things. Data must be formatted and accessible for local and state planners, and that planners need to increase their skill sets effectively to use this data and incorporate it in their actions, and that it needs to be incorporated not only into hazard mitigation, but comprehensive planning and really incorporating these things into all the planning processes. They also listed a number of things that the federal government can do. I don't have much sway over that, except my one vote that I get every couple of years and things like that. However, I do work with our state and federal partners, and they are aware of these things as well. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that the number 9 here is investments decisions should take a regional perspective and be integrated across infrastructure types and sectors to realize co-benefits. And I think that's one of my main aims. I have been at the MPO now for 4 years, officially full-time. And so I plan on being here for a long time. And I think that number 9 is really the thing that's driving me to do the work that I am and to craft it the way that I am. And so I hope you'll enjoy that. So 2 of the big things, obviously, there are data. Data is huge. Data is messy. It can get really, really misconstrued if it's not interpreted correctly. But the other one is regionalism. Like watershed management authorities and water, climate does not just stop at, I live right next to the Clive and Windsor Heights border. It doesn't stop here. It keeps coming across. And so really, if one partner is moving, we all should be looking at how we can move as well. And so I tried to influence that a little bit, and I continue to do so. And right now, I'm just trying to aid in some of the first climate planning steps for the Metro, and of course, the hurdles that come with that. So I'll talk about 2 projects that I'm working on. One is the Central Iowa Climate Toolbox, and the other is the MPO just recently became an ICLEI, which I used to have the ICLEI memorized, International Collaborative for Local Environmental Initiatives, I think. Anyways, they go by locals and governments for sustainability now, but the MPO recently became a member. And so this hopefully is very crucial to moving the Metro forward as well. So the first one is a climate action or Central Iowa Climate Toolbox. And we are a planning organization. And so right now, in the infancy of this website, it really is geared towards planners who are looking at how these new climate initiatives or new climate goals or what have you, or climate impacts might be integrated into their work. So there's a whole page about climate planning foundations. Climate planning is not that far-fetched. It's not far off from what a lot of us planners are professionally taught in school, things like that. But there are other considerations, and there's lots of different ways to incorporate that. I think that a lot of the big cities have the advantage of having more staff and more funding and things like that. So they get to have completely separate climate plans. I would say a town like Hartford, Iowa, they probably only have a comprehensive plan and a hazard mitigation plan. So how do we incorporate these things in there? And so I kind of walk through that with planners and give them some resources. And also we continue to put together webinars to address this as well. A whole nother page is on climate assessments, data and projections. So right now you can go to 1,000 different websites and find all sorts of different assessments and things like that. And really, I've had them all bookmarked for about my whole career here at the MPO. And so really, I took a lot of the things that I have bookmarked and that I find useful and thought about what other people find useful and created a whole page on that. It will be continually updated as new assessments or data or projections come out. But what's there now is what the most recent from last August. The next page is all about hazards, risk, and vulnerabilities. So that's one of the big things, I think the big ticket item for a lot of elected officials, and what are the risk, hazards, and vulnerabilities. And that could be infrastructure, it could be energy, it could be food systems, and a lot of things like that. So as these come out on social demographics or economic ones and things like that, I've been creating this depository that houses those in one safe place. You can also find all of the regional hazard mitigation plans linked there. Really just wanted to kind of have a one-stop shop for Central Iowa folks to investigate these more. At present, the greenhouse gas emissions inventory page is just that. It really walks local planners through how to conduct their own greenhouse gas emissions inventory. However, in the future, and I'll talk about this with my next item, I plan on giving these greenhouse gas inventories to our metro communities so that that is taken off the table. It can be a strenuous process. Cassie knows that well. I know Cassie's on the call here. And so, you know, it's one of those hurdles that we keep finding that, you know, people are getting kind of hung up on, oh, we don't know what to do yet. Oh, we don't know who to get to do it for us. Oh, how much money is it gonna, you know, there's a lot of hurdles right there. And so eventually that page will also house the Metro's greenhouse gas inventories. And if I, in a perfect world, all of Central Iowa's, our 8-county region. So then there's 2 other pages that really look at how planners can start to integrate mitigation and adaptation strategies into their work. And so one of those, both of those pages are really, again, geared towards planners, but as this evolves, it will become more for the general public and other practitioners and things like that. But just for an example, the adaptation strategies page is really built on the Iowa Smart Planning principles that are set out in the Iowa Code for comprehensive planning to take into consideration as the process goes on. So I would invite you to go to our website, dmampo.org. There's a climate toolbox tab, or you can do /climate hyphen, I think that's a hyphen, toolbox, and you can check it out. I take all the constructive criticism I can get. I will just say I am not a web developer. My husband is, and so he taught me a little bit about WordPress, but if you don't like how it looks right now, I do plan on hiring someone to smooth it out a little bit, but the content really is all there. And so as things continue to come out, that'll continue to evolve as well. The other one was ICLEI. So we became an ICLEI regional member. So it's a large global network of governments that are looking at sustainability. And then, so this membership will help provide our region with frameworks for policy and action. It'll give me the tools that I need to help provide the greenhouse gas inventories. And then we'll start crafting technical assistance programs for our member communities throughout the MPO and network with other folks. There are a number of different sources that I looked at to, you know, be involved in and get a greenhouse gas inventory tool. But with City of Des Moines leadership in ICLEI, Frank County is, I believe it's the Global Executive Committee President. With his leadership and their longstanding membership, it was an easy choice there to choose this organization. And so really, one of the main things I use as my argument for the MPO becoming one. So you see here, transportation is 26% of Des Moines greenhouse gases in 2017. Des Moines is quite compact. What happens as we go further out? What happens when we get to the Waukee, the Mitchellville, the Bondurants? I think the transportation could be a larger slice of this pie as we get further out. There's less transit, there's less walkability and things like that. And so that was kind of, you know, my pitch. This is how transportation fits into this. We can collect all this other data as well. But it also was sold with, this is a technical barrier for a lot of communities. I live in Windsor Heights. Our public works department, I think, is 5 people. They don't have the energy and manpower to create these reports. So removing that technical barrier, providing them the information, and then letting them decide how to do it. I'm all for you helping out with best practices and things like that, but really allowing them to figure out what works best for them, because there is no cookie cutter for this kind of thing. Besides giving it to each of the communities, incorporating this into our regional efforts. So we do short and long range planning here at the MPO. And so how does this play into that? What does our long range transportation plan look like if we find out that 33% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the metro come from transportation? What do we do with that? How do we fund projects and programs and things like that? How will that work? And then we are a regional data hub, so I love to keep cohesiveness across the region. I really look forward to, once we figure out what all we need, bringing all these cities together on technical trainings. And really, you know, all of my elected officials always like to save money. And so if each of the individual communities around the metro did this, it would be more than $20,000. And so we did it for 3. And so it's just one of those things. Each of the member communities can join later on. But this was all in a big push because we knew that infrastructure bill was coming sometime. I think it's been coming for like 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. I don't even know. It's been a really long time. We knew an infrastructure bill would keep coming. And even if the Republicans were in there were things about carbon reduction, resiliency, the writing is on the wall. And so now with this new infrastructure bill, there are exactly those programs out there. And hopefully this will lend our communities in the metro to have more stronger grant programs. So that's what I have for now. I will say that my next steps are obviously all the time updating that toolbox. I'll be producing the emissions inventories for each of the communities. I'll be continuing to do things like this. I speak at all sorts of different kinds of meetings and things like that, and raising the awareness of these impacts and the vulnerabilities and the best practices and things like that. Carrie and I have actually been coordinating, and Laura talked about it just a little bit ago, that we're putting on a webinar about comprehensive planning with the climate in mind. How does climate get incorporated in this? And we'll be looking at those smart planning principles as well. And then, as always, as a regional planner, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in our metro. It's hard to keep track sometimes, especially when I don't leave this little room in my house very often, but trying to keep a pulse on those regional needs and getting ahead of them, and then pivoting to assist as things come up. So that's what I'll be doing for the next years, I don't know how many years, but for as long as I possibly can. And so I think my time's up, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. There's my contact information if you've ever want to reach out to me. I am an email kind of gal. If it's not in my email or on my calendar, I lose track of it. So with that, yeah, I'll close from here.
Well, I would love to ask a question,
Sure.
Allison. Well, actually, I have two questions. Do you have an approximate date for those greenhouse gas inventories for the communities?
Yeah, so I would hope to have the majority of them done within this calendar year. This week I just came, so our membership started on January 1st. I've been out till this past Monday. This week I actually will get into the programming the tools online, and I'll start asking for all of the information. And I plan on doing, so when you ask, I'm asking for 15 different cities. And so once I get that, cleaning it up, making reports for all, I would hope 18 months is my long-term, hopefully by this calendar year though.
It sounds like, I mean, obviously it's a very complex task to take on. So that's very ambitious. My next question was, in general, with this work, would more publicity or credit help you, or is it better to be below the radar because it would attract negativity for people to know that you're working on this?
I do kind of move strategically. The things that lined up that, over the last 4 years really were my stars aligning, and they were done strategically. Do I mind? I don't mind publicity on this kind of stuff. I want people to know that these things are coming out. But I wouldn't say that I go out and tell lots of everybody, all my friends, but my friends are kind of sick of hearing about it. So it's hard to say most times. Right now, I don't have anything in front of any policymakers, so right now I don't mind, but
because I think when you come out with these inventories, I think that's going to be pretty newsworthy, but I would be interested in reading them and possibly writing about them even, but anyway, just wasn't sure whether that is welcome.
Yeah, so when I release the inventories, there will be a bigger splash. It's the lead up to that. I'm just trying to make sure that we're stepping correctly, especially with the election, and now regional elected officials are kind of changing right now, kind of getting the pulse of what's going on. But yeah, when those all come out, I will be going around to every city council, giving it to them, and then from there, I'm all for the publicity because that's the data that we need.
So we have, go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say there's our former board member, Irv Kloss, has a question in the chat. How can a small business do a greenhouse inventory?
So that is a little bit more complex. And Cassie, you've done a little bit more than I have, so feel free to speak up as well. So that is a little bit more complex just because the scoping, there's 3 tiers of scopes for greenhouse gases. And it's those further out scopes that are harder to gauge necessarily. It's kind of those externality kind of things. But there are resources out there. And Irv, if you want to send me an email, I can send you the resources that I kind of have filed away and stuff. It is a little bit more complex. That the data is not pretty, but it is possible. And there's organizations that can help. I didn't look at any of these.
Oh, Julia has her hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah,
Julia?
thank you. So Allison, my question is the order or the priorities of the cities that you're doing your greenhouse gas emission reports.
So yeah, so right now I have planned to cut my teeth on Ankeny and West Des Moines just because they're the largest of our 2 suburbs, and I'd rather cut my teeth on the bigger stuff and learn all the stuff, all the intricacies on those. It's just kind of how I work. After that, I haven't figured out how to prioritize each of them. I could go in alphabetical order. I thought about tossing them in a hat, so then there's like no discretion, no one's mad. But honestly, I haven't thought past those first 2. I think those first 2 are going to take me through the spring, and then we'll get the other ones out. But I will say that I think the smaller communities are going to be easier because in the greenhouse emissions report, it goes through a lot of the sustainability initiatives that each of the cities are already taking on and like outlines those. And so I can get a lot of that stuff done well in advance with the help of a lovely intern. And so I think that those smaller ones, I don't have an order. If you have a suggestion, my husband suggested the hat thing. That's why I have been leaning towards that way. But, alphabetical or by population, I'm not quite sure yet, honestly. But I'll be cutting my teeth with the 2 bigger ones.
I see somebody posted in the chat. Jeremy, thank you. There's a link to a resource for small businesses from the EPA's website. I don't know if everybody can see the chat. If you look under that more with the 3 dots, you should be able to pull up the chat and there's a link there. So
yes, thank you, Jeremy. That's exactly what I was going to send.
I can't actually see who has their hands up. Were there any other questions? Carrie, did you have any questions?
I don't. This is good,
Right.
Allison. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I love actually starting with those fast growing suburbs. I think makes sense for a lot of reasons. So
yeah, and I guess the one thing I didn't mention is when I was talking to the ICLEI staff about which year to pull requests for, I am going to be doing the emissions reports based on 2019, just because 2020 obviously was 2020 and 2021 data is not quite ready for me yet. So we'll be basing it on 2019. And then after that, the cycle that we update those will really be kind of determined by the cities, what their needs are and things like that. So yeah, more to come.
Very good.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I will send out a notice, I think, to members before that. Was it, I'm sorry, February 2nd or February 3rd, that webinar?
Yep, Groundhog Day.
Right. So we'll be, I think people, in case people want to know about that closer to the time, sending out a reminder is good. So.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Allison. That was exciting. So our next speaker, I'm going to do a little roundabout introduction before I fully introduce her, is we've been doing our Best Development Awards program. I think it started in 2001. You're going to hear more detail about the Best Development Awards here in a little bit from Julia. But it's been from that program over the last 6 years since I've been with 1,000 Friends that we've heard repeatedly from communities, especially the smaller and mid-sized communities, how much they really appreciate the recognition for doing these projects and for really making an effort at trying to drive sustainability in their communities. And so it really matters a lot. And as we've talked to some of these communities, we've heard, you know, how difficult it is for some of the communities to do that because they don't have the staff capacity and the resources and so forth. So, you know, this work that Allison is doing is amazing, and we'd love to see that replicated in other parts of the state as well. But we were trying to think, as 1,000 Friends of Iowa, we were really trying to think, you know, how do we help communities do more? So we're part of a regional network called the REAMP Network. And through that program, we got some funding in 2018 and 2019 to do some research, to really dig in. We had some interns who really kind of dug in and reached out to communities to find out what communities were currently doing around sustainability, land use, climate action, and so forth. You know, what some of the barriers were to doing it. And so we did some mapping on that. And then we went and looked at, we started with larger communities with populations over 40,000. Then we went to smaller communities that were under 40,000 population and talked to them. And about that same time, there used to be a national program called STAR Communities. And we had heard from a number of smaller communities that they liked the STAR Communities program, but it was too expensive and it was too challenging for smaller communities to really do it. And they had like a series of best practices and so forth, and some guidance and tool, you know, resources for communities. So we really started thinking, how do we create something for communities that that can help communities, especially communities that might not have a lot of capacity. And out of that, we reached out to, we brought in Brian Campbell, who at the time was from the sustainability director at Central College. And we brought in the folks over at UNI's Center for Energy and Environmental Education. And at the time, we've been speaking with Kamyar Cheyenne and Eric Giddens, and started talking with a lot of different people, Jeff Geertz, Jeremy Karen, a number of different folks. And UNI really liked the idea, and they said, hey, let's develop something. And so Cassie is the staff person who's been working on that and is going to talk about this program and kind of this exciting new thing that for the state of Iowa that I think in the long run can have a lot of help for communities and move us up. So Cassandra, Sonne, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. Does that show everyone the actual proper presentation? Okay,
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so just a bit about myself. Carrie introduced me really well, but I was with Green Iowa AmeriCorps last year after getting my master's degree in environmental governance. And Green Iowa AmeriCorps really spurred my interest in greenhouse gas inventories and climate action, because I had the opportunity to work with Jeremy, Karen on Des Moines greenhouse gas inventory, and I learned a lot there and really wanted to continue that work. And then I heard about this position at the CEEE and kind of how they were envisioning this program to develop, and I was super happy to get on board with that. So the name we have right now is Resilient Iowa Communities. There's already the Iowa Sustainable Communities. We were originally, there were Sustainable Iowa Communities. We originally were going to have the word sustainable in the name, but the University of Iowa has a very similar program name. But we will be collaborating with them, hopefully. So having our two titles shouldn't be too much of a problem. And yeah, so I think Carrie kind of talked about this already, just a brief history of the program. it was really the brainchild of 1,000 Friends of Iowa and UNI CEEE. I know that Carrie, Eric Giddens, Kamyar put a ton of thought and work into this. And then a staff member was hired to run the project in September 21. That's me. And then there was this advisory council that was assembled to bring different areas of expertise together, which is really, really great because I am one person and I can't know about everything with these different, and especially because I think we'll get to this, but RIC has 5 main categories. So it has buildings and energy, land use, transportation, environmental management, and community economic development. So it is quite broad in terms of how it captures sustainability. And it's been incredible to have people who dedicate their time to these different issues like Allison and Jeremy, who can really provide some expertise on that. So that I want to really give a shout out to my advisory council there because they've made this program in project what it is. So we're currently in the process of recruiting communities. We have 1 community on board, signed, sealed, which is Fairfield. We had several other communities that were quite interested, and I had some meetings, and then the holidays happened, and the elections happened and city council turnover happened. So we're still kind of trying to figure that out. We've had a couple of different ways. So I'm working with some AmeriCorps members who work in Linn County, see if any communities there are interested. Like I said, I met with the University of Iowa, and their sustainability program is actually quite different. It's not that much focused on the environment. So they kind of had this idea that maybe communities who are interested in their work could also be interested in this program. So we're hoping to make some connections there and really empower communities to join this program. So we'll launch it in 2022. That's the pilot year launch date. The exact time is to be determined. We're looking for about 6 to 10 communities and want at least 5 before we officially launch the program. So yeah, I'll say this again, but if you have a community, you have connections, and you think that the city staff would be interested in it, please connect me because I would love to speak with them. I have further resources about what this program is. And so participants in the program. So we specifically chose the word community, not city, because we want all to be welcome. We really want a diverse range of cities. We don't want to be only big cities or only small cities. We don't, even if a city doesn't, our community, sorry, even if a community doesn't have a lot of background in sustainability work, we still want them to feel like they can come on board. So part of that is we really want to develop this knowledge sharing and connection with outside resources and have that be a really big part of the Resilient Iowa Communities program. So this is an opportunity for communities that have done a lot of work in sustainability to get recognized, to be able to kind of help communities that haven't done much work and really be leaders in the environmental field in Iowa. And then of course, smaller communities, they get the benefits of being able to learn and tackle some of these projects that might be very difficult to do otherwise if you start out with one city staff member looking at this best practice and they don't have the time to research everything and they don't want to reinvent the wheel. And we're also planning to utilize existing resources at the CEEE. So besides helping with this program, I work with some of the AmeriCorps members, and I also do greenhouse gas inventories. And then we have a food program at UNI, pesticide, public health people at UNI at the CEEE, and some food systems. So we have some resources available there at UNI that we can help with. It's also about really creating a network of resources through nonprofits like 1,000 Friends of Iowa, where someone knows someone who can who's an expert in the field who can help a community, whereas just trying to cold call, another community for help might be quite difficult. So we really want to encourage that networking and knowledge sharing, and helping communities also find grants, for example, that could fund some of their projects. Joining the Resilient Iowa Communities program is completely free. And we have best practices that hopefully should really lead to some long-term money saving, especially with buildings and energy, for example. But obviously we do recognize that some of this is going to take investment on the part of the communities. So we really want to make that as smooth as we can for them as possible. So the structure of the program is really about combining guidance with flexibility. So this program, we're currently part of the Sustainable States Network, which basically is about, I think, 15 states across the United States, especially in the Midwest and East Coast, although California and Colorado are part of it as well, but they have some different stuff going on as well. But this is the model that we worked off of, and we changed it to suit Iowa because for example, Minnesota Green Steps has like 150 best practices, and that's really overwhelming for me if I'm trying to evaluate those for community members. And it's also really, overwhelming for them, because if you hand a community that hasn't done a lot of sustainability work and tell them to pick stuff out of 150 best practices, they might not even open the paper before to get into that. But at the same time, we didn't want to be so rigid that it kind of excluded communities who were smaller, communities that have less financial resources, communities that have different priorities, et cetera. So we came across, or I guess what we settled on was this range of options across different categories to really allow, this is the communities, not cities, but I still slip up sometimes, to allow communities to work on projects that best suit their needs. So as I mentioned before, there's 5 primary categories, which is buildings and lighting, land use, transportation, environmental management, and community and economic development. And at the current moment, each category offers 6 best practices, and communities do not need to complete them all. This was something where I was talking to a mayor and she was like, this looks great and I'd love to do this, but there's no way we're getting all this, through in our community, our city. And then I had to clarify, it's 1 best practice from each category for the kind of minimum bronze level recognition. And that's something that clarity has really helped a lot in making sure that communities feel like they're undertaking something that's reasonable. We also understand that some of these projects are not things you get done in a year. So you can't necessarily, if you're trying to be ambitious, if you're starting a project, you still deserve recognition for the work that you've done up to it, even if it's not 100% complete. So what we kind of ask for in terms of evaluation is to have some kind of concrete proof of the project moving forward. So not like we're having meetings about it or someone was going to write a plan, but something that's really a bit tangible. But like I said, we recognize that there's different levels of resources and we really want to make sure that this is accessible to communities as possible. So we don't want to be, it's really about, like I said, not being too rigid, but not being so flexible that it becomes meaningless. And throughout the pilot year, we're really hoping to learn which actions are useful to communities, whether any need to be adjusted. And we also want to reach out to communities about ideas for new best practices. So if we find that we're working with 10 communities and 9 of them say this action is just not something we're interested in, not something we're probably ever going to work on, that tells us something important. If we hear from communities that they like the idea of the action, but they thought that the way that we suggested to go about it could be improved, we want to take that feedback into account. And we also want to know from communities about ideas for new best practices. So if there's something that communities are interested in, they say, something in XYZ field would be helpful. We can start thinking of best practices there. Or if you have a community that says we've done this and this is really cool and we want recognition for this, we can add it to the best practices. And to be clear, I should clarify here that a community that has already done something on the best practice list gets credit for it. So we're not asking them to reinvent the wheel, or we're not punishing them for having already taken steps forward, because that would of course be a very strange decision on our part. So I wanted to give a few examples of the best practices and kind of how they vary and provide that structure and that flexibility. So for example, one of the land use best practices is to strengthen floodplain ordinances. And this could be particularly useful in communities that have experienced a lot of flooding, and that's a real kind of pressing issue to them. It's also developing a comprehensive plan, so a little bit more of that long-term planning is an option. And then another example is encouraging community involvement in planning. And this is, bringing in organizations like 1,000 Friends of Iowa, community members, who live in that community, to really get input into planning, because something that we're really trying to weave throughout this program is an eye on equity. And that means being very intentional about how you include community involvement. So it's not just a matter of, we held one meeting and there was 5 people from the community there, and that was held at a time that maybe wasn't super accessible. So really thinking deeply about how to get communities involved with planning, how to make sure you're getting feedback from the people who will live with with the decisions that the community makes. We also, another option is really to foster meetings around with regional partners, so nearby townships, businesses, and community members to think through land use planning on a larger scale. So this could be something like the work Allison does with the MPO, because no community exists in isolation. So you really have to think about how land use in one community might affect another. or what the roads look like between them. So by bringing communities together regionally to think about land use planning, it can be really helpful for all of those communities. And another example, the last example I'll give here for best practices of land use is including climate adaptation and mitigation, energy independence, and/or EV ready goals and comprehensive planning. So even built into this, you can see some of the flexibility. It can be climate adaptation, climate mitigation, energy independence, EV ready. There are these options, and we really try to build that in so that any community can take that on, even if they're not ready to do a specific part yet. Sorry. Okay. So the examples of the best practices for transportation, this is not all of them. Again, I just pulled out a few that I thought would, portray well what we're getting at. So strategizing to allow more walking, biking, and transit use. There are many different options. So that's kind of the overall goal, but in terms of how a community gets there to, for example, certification as a walk or bike friendly city is one option. Changing public transport use to make it easier for people to where the stops are in order to get on board, things like that. Another one is creating ADA compliant and pedestrian friendly sidewalks, which, again, if a community is really working maybe on that equity piece, that might be really important. Or we see how pedestrian friendly sidewalks can fit into making a more walkable community. So we kind of want because we want communities to keep working on this, right? Like not just do one action in each category and kind of that's it, but they want to continue with the program. So it's really helpful if one kind of best practice can lead to the others, like taking a step forward, which might make it a little less scary than taking on, something really big, like making a walk-friendly community certification. Another example is promoting equity and access to public transportation, particularly in investing in vulnerable communities. So this again goes back to our question about equity, which, as I said, we really want, we were discussing about how to include equity because we knew from the start it was really important. And we talked to some wonderful experts at the Sustainable States Network and really realized that one, equity goes across a lot of different markers, and you have to be aware of all of them. And equity is not something that's kind of a side piece. It has to be woven into each of these goals. So this one is very kind of, you can think of how, for example, making a more walkable city, you can be very intentional about which sidewalks you start out with, which areas maybe need those improvements first, et cetera. And then we can also see things like public transportation use, where is that evolve for vulnerable communities? What's the pricing structure like? Things like that. We also see an example that ties back into flooding, so addressing landscaping and stormwater management issues for streets. So again, if this is a community that's been hit really hard by flooding, this might be something that's very relevant to them. So you start to see how cities can take their different needs and apply these different best practices to them throughout these categories. And then you see the last one I picked out is just incentivizing EV readiness or updating building codes and offering incentives to provide EV charging. And if you think back to the land use where we had, no, that's the wrong way. So if you look back to land use where we had including climate adaptation, mitigation, energy independence, and or EV ready goals into comprehensive planning, you can kind of see how these things start to connect, like I said before, so that it allows communities to kind of have a smooth transition to next steps and they can really marry some of these projects together. And then there's, of course, the question of how you can get involved. All participation thoughts are welcome, the same way that we want to make sure that members of their community have input in terms of kind of how these processes are undertaken. We also want to hear from people who are really interested and feel passionately about these issues. That feedback is really valuable. Any connections to communities also incredibly useful. If you know someone in a community, you have connections to a community that might be interested in joining this program, like I said, send them my way, or we can set up a conversation or however you want to approach it, because I would really love to connect with communities who are excited about this kind of work. If you have expertise in a certain area and you want to kind of throw out some ideas for future best practices, again, I'm happy to sit down with you and take those thoughts, because we want to learn from as diverse a sources as possible when we think through best practices to offer to cities. So that kind of ties into leveraging your expertise, because I know everyone here has a different background, different passion, and like I said, we want to welcome that as much as possible. And then there's also connecting the program to resources you're aware of, because, you know, we as an organization, you and I don't necessarily know every kind of organization across Iowa that would have resources to assist communities with this. But some of you more locally might know certain entities or resources that are offered, maybe at a university that's in your town or something like that, or a smaller nonprofit that would be interested in helping besides, you know, 1,000 Friends of Iowa. So there's really, really encourage everyone to get involved if you're interested in. There's a menu, just like there's a menu of options for communities, there's a menu of options for how you want to get involved. And we would really love to have you on board and, you know, really take into account your thoughts and have this something, be this something that's as community driven as possible. We're really excited to start this program, and we hope to involve communities all across Iowa to create better, healthier, and more sustainable lives for all of their citizens. You can contact me at my email above. Like Allison, I am very much an email person, or setting up meetings. So that's the best way to contact me. And like I said, if you have any thoughts or any input, please contact me because I really want to hear it. So I will. Let's see, I don't know how to look at chat. Okay. Should I stop screen sharing?
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Can I ask one question? And my internet connection was a little bit unstable, so I apologize if this is something you covered, but you said your goal is to have 5 before you launch publicly. You want to have 5 communities. Are you looking for communities of different population sizes or geographically dispersed around the state, or what are your criteria for before you do the public facing launch?
Yeah, we would love to get as diverse a community as possible in terms of geography and population size. I don't want to name names of cities that we're working with right now, but we are kind of involved in communities that, you know, have less than 3,000 people, for example. And of course, larger cities also welcome. And that's really our idea, is how do we connect these communities so that, you know, we're not reinventing the wheel, to allow this leadership to be recognized and really promoted, because these cities that are already, communities that are already doing a ton deserve the recognition for what they're doing right now. And then if they can pass that on to communities that are a bit smaller or don't have as much familiarity with sustainable work, you know, they're learning from each other. So yeah, diversity across pretty much all metrics you can think of in terms of communities, very welcome.
Anybody else have any questions? I'm having trouble seeing whether anyone has their hand raised here.
So in terms of website, we are working on that. I will link, let me pull up the link because we have, no, that's what I want. We have a link to my page on UNI's website at the CEEE. I will grab that in a second when I'm not simultaneously talking. We're hoping to work with someone from UNI to set up a proper website. We recognize that once we have a website, it will be easier for to spread the word. But that's just a matter of we're trying to figure out who at UNI to contact and how to leverage our connection there to get a website that's, you know, not something that is thrown together by people who don't necessarily have expertise in that, because we want it to look professional and appealing. So yes, I will pass on the link if you can give me a moment to my page that kind of gives an overview of what I do at UNI, which might be a good way to start.
Thank you.
And Cassie, I can also send out the link to folks after this webinar with the recording as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I have that in the chat. So that should at least give a brief idea of what we offer UNI in terms of climate action planning. And yeah, I guess the website other than that is to be continued.
And do you think when you go public, you think more publicity will be helpful to you?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, that's something, again, the university obviously has publicity, but we as a department don't really have anyone dedicated to that. So any way that we can kind of spread the word is great, because especially when part of the reward is recognition, you want to make sure that the word is being spread and these communities kind of get what they deserve and you know, really are applauded for the work that they're doing because it's so important. Everyone here knows how important and timely this work is. So of course, we want to be as positive as possible with all the communities and their efforts they make.
And I know, as Carrie mentioned, introducing you, and Julia has done a lot of work with our Best Development Awards program, but I know that just even casually talking to award winners at our ceremonies over the years, people really do appreciate that recognition. A lot of work goes into this, and to know that somebody noticed is always nice.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, question.
I would like to bring up a couple of comments. Sandra, is in your land use planning, you might involve the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust, which is attempting to establish small farms around cities in order to grow food, local food. Also, you need to incorporate trees, particularly, well, any kind of tree, but particularly food trees, those that can grow food for local sources. Apples is a good example. Iowa is well suited for apples, and you need to set aside places for pollinators, and prairies, for example, need to be incorporated into the planning process for land use. It has not been done in the past. So those are just a few suggestions that I'd like to make. Thanks.
Yep, I've noted that down. I think that's a really good point. I know we do have a few things touched on that in the land use, and they're not the examples I pulled out, but I will absolutely go back through our best practices and make sure that that's included. My kind of original passion before I got into kind of the climate action side of things was wildlife conservation. So it's something that I very much care about and still want to, that general conservation of land and species is something that I certainly want to make sure we're promoting. Yeah. Time management, I was trying to make sure I didn't go through every single best practice, but there is more. And Carrie, you can include a copy of the best practices maybe when you send this out. Perfect. Yeah.
Great.
Other questions that people have? All right. We're not a very talkative group tonight. All right. Well,
Cassandra,
Yeah.
are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
This is Bill Eady from Juneau, Alaska. Also Waterloo West High 61. So voice from the past. Did you get an email I sent you a while ago, including a presentation I made years ago about car-free communities as a planner that would either brighten you or horrify you? And how that might be applied to Iowa communities, Des Moines, obviously, Waterloo, Cedar Falls, especially in the context of what we've learned in the last month about the impending collapse of the West Antarctic ice field, ice shelf, I think it is. It's floating. The ice cubes are already in the water, so that if it melts, it has no effect on sea level rise. But that is the buttress for the Thwaites Glacier. If that slides into the water, millions of people are going to be fleeing the coastal areas and coming to Iowa. Where are you going to put them? What are we going to build for them that they can afford and we can afford? I know that's a far out concept. It may not have much relevance on what you're doing, but it's something that you could be thinking about, and it may be important. Things are changing fast. So thank you for doing what you've been doing. And we've been supporting KFOI for many years and probably intend to continue doing so. We just don't want people to bury the world's best farmland anymore.
Absolutely.
So,
I don't
thank
think I
you.
received your email. That I was going through a weird transition period the past couple of months where
Okay.
I've been using my personal email, and then I had a different UNI email, and then I switched to being a staff member, and I got a different UNI email again. So it probably got lost in all that. If you don't mind resending it to me, I'm sure Carrie can put my email also in.
Okay, okay. I'll try
But yeah, I
again.
would really appreciate your insight there. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining from Alaska.
Hi, Laura. We haven't spoken in a decade or so, huh?
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cassie, I think I also have a copy of that as well, that if Bill can't get it to you, I can always forward it to you.
Perfect.
There's a couple of people who are
Sure,
great.
sure. Forward it to everybody.
All right,
Go
will
ahead.
do.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, looks like both Mary Ellen Miller and Irv both have their hands up. So Mary Ellen, why don't we start with you and then go over to Irv?
Irv just may not have taken his down. One of the things, I'm now living in Wayne County, which is very rural, one of the least populated counties in the state. And we're dealing with some pretty serious lack of housing. We have a battery plant that is expanding. It's now no longer owned locally, and they want to hire 300 workers in the next year. We have no place for those people to live. Over 75% of the current employees in that battery plant don't live in the county.
Wow.
There is absolutely no housing. Now, the county still owns the county farmland. They lease out the farmland. They sold the buildings in 5 acres. It is within walking distance if you want a good 2-mile hike, or they could build a bike trail. But what I can't understand anymore is the prejudice against pre-manufactured housing parks. When I bring it up, those are trailer trash. Well, I have to tell you, I had a home in northern Minnesota for 25 years in a very upscale, seasonal, summer pre-manufactured housing park. Yes, they're mobile, they're movable, but any house is movable, right? Mm-hmm. But my neighbors spent $150,000 on their homes. I mean, and we had very strict rules, and so what I don't understand is what can we do to get people to see that those are affordable housing options, and that yet I know the prejudice is there, but also the people on our local county housing development committee, whatever it is. So they're realtors and they're the owners of the lumber yard. So they don't want these. But at the same time, my local contractor tells me he's not even buying plywood anymore because it's so poor quality. He is buying particle board when he's building homes. And that's what keeps the costs down of pre-manufactured homes is they're built indoors. They're not sticks out in open to the elements. So it really reduces the cost. I will just end by telling you, I live in one. I live in what's called a double wide 3-bedroom, 2-bath, very spacious, very comfortable, but there is no basement. There is no attic. But the derecho came through here. I spent most of the past 2 days helping neighbors and myself clean up trees. And other buildings were affected. My building, I didn't lose a shingle. Everything is standing, but all around me, there were buildings ripped apart and torn apart. So to me, it's just something I just can't quite figure out how to move people beyond this mindset, because we need housing in rural Iowa. It's affordable housing. And I just would love any ideas people have on how we can get around the prejudice and bias. But a wonderful program. Good to see old friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And sorry. No, I was just going to say that's not my area of expertise, but the great part about having an advisory council is someone on it probably knows more than I do about the specific issue. So I'll put that actually in my notes to bring up at our meeting just to see if we can kind of get started in some sense, considering that issue. If it doesn't make it into this year, like I said, we're still thinking about best practices in the future. So we can really take your thoughts there into account.
Okay. Anybody else before we move on to our Julia to talk about our Best Development Awards? Thank you so much, Cassie. That was a really interesting presentation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Carrie, do you want to say anything to introduce Julia or?
All right, Julia has been with 1000 Friends of Iowa since 2016. She is the brains behind our Best Development Award. She coordinates that program and has done an amazing job. And she's going to give us a little overview of the program and a sneak peek of the award ceremony coming up. So Julia, all yours.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here so you can see, and thanks for the introduction. So the name of the program is the Best Development Awards. It's one of my favorite things to do. Again, my name is Julia. I grew up in rural Polk County, in between Des Moines and Ankeny. So when I looked at 1000 Friends of Iowa, I knew Carrie was looking to hire someone. I looked at the mission and the vision. And for me, growing up, being able to have a lot of darkness, and now, Ankeny and Des Moines are both pressing in on my family's home place, which is fortunately protected by a state park. I definitely see the value. There's a lot of benefit to an organization like 1000 Friends of Iowa. So thank you all for being members and attending. Tell you a little bit about the program. It was established in 2001, and it recognizes sustainability practices. And we have these 12 categories just to show that not everything is sustainable. You can have things that are promoting sustainability that are not built. So when we look at categories like innovative leadership, that's one example of something that's not built. But it could be like your policy, any kinds of coalitions forming that promotes the mission of 1000 Friends of Iowa. So this program really helps with those things like protecting farmland, our natural areas, revitalizing our neighborhoods, our communities, and improving that quality of life and keeping that quality of life high. Also, when we look at the vision of the organization, we try to recognize great work that are great examples of this vision. So how does it work? So the program starts with a nomination period. It usually opens around Labor Day and it closes in early November. Your project that you nominate should be complete by the end of that nomination period. After that, we have 5 jurors who come in, look through all of the nominations, select the winners for the different categories, and then in late January, we present awards to the different winners. And this year, our jurors came from a really nice mix of academia and government and the private sector. Everyone brings a really unique perspective. So something kind of interesting, Bethany Wilcoxon down here, she is our newest juror, or newer juror. She used to work at the MPO. She worked on the Tomorrow Plan and Capital Crossers for quite a while. So she has a government background, even though she is currently in the private sector. The jurors, they understand, we have an architect, we have a planner. They understand we're not giving out a planning award, we're not giving out an architecture award, we're giving out awards to nominations that support that mission and vision of our organization. When they look at the nominations, the jurors have, again, our criteria, such as infill, sustainable building materials. Everyone has to match up with those as best they can, because that supports the overall mission and vision of the organization. But we also have specific criteria for each category. So something that might help a nomination in the transportation and complete streets category probably is not going to be a criteria on the list for something, say, in the innovative leadership category. So there's really specific things that our nominators need to write into their nomination. And there is a $25 fee for our nominations. This is a little background. I went through the history that I could find. It looks like we have some growth that's occurred with the number of categories, the number of nominations and winners that we get here. There's a nice map. If you go to our website, 1000friendsofiowa.org, if you click on the what we do, Best Development Awards, you will see this map, and you can see which categories are in which communities. You know, it's pretty fun to look at. I'm going to continue on, talk about this year. This year we had 9 nominations and we had 7 winners. So that's 6 categories and then a best of show. And we have the communities of Bellevue, Des Moines, Dubuque, Louisa County, Maquoketa, and Windsor Heights. Nice big variety. It is always kind of nice to see a lot of nominations. And so this is one that's here in central Iowa. What happened in Windsor Heights was the city, they've been working on University Avenue for quite a while to rethink it. It's taken many years. So this award is in the transportation and complete streets category. This is a road diet. They shrank the number of lanes and increased the safety and access to multiple modes of transportation, such as cycling and walking. They also, in this category, this is also interesting, the incorporation of stormwater management practices was incorporated into this nomination. So that also made it a little more interesting for our jurors. Another winner is over in Dubuque, and this is a picture that I found of the Dupaco Voices building. This is pretty interesting. It's in an old part of town. This is a building that was kind of a landmark that everybody wanted to keep in use. It keeps a lot of materials out of the landfill. Their windows were removed. They went to you can probably still find some that, because there's so many of them, to be resold. The multimodal transportation I thought was pretty interesting, again, because of where it's located. There's a lot of different ways that you can get to work in this building. One thing that Dupaco has done is give their employees a transportation stipend to support, you know, whichever way they want to use to get to and from work. There's also the Tom and Ruth Harkin Center at Drake University. This is an interesting building. Again, it's built with universal design. All of the utilities are run by electricity. A lot of the electricity comes from their solar array. They incorporated stormwater management, best management practices. And this, again, it's kind of like the city of Windsor Heights. A lot of redevelopment has been going on for years and years. This is a new construction building, and it was done in an older area, one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city of Des Moines. And it won the Best of Show category. It would be great if we could have you all attend our award ceremony. It is going to be in a couple weeks, Thursday, January 27th. It will be virtual. I'm guessing we're going to invite you all with an email so that that really long link there for Zoom will be a little more accessible for you. I guess if you have any questions, I would love to take any of them, because I'd kind of go through what Cassandra was saying. It's nice. Everyone appreciates having recognition outside of their own community. When they do great work, everyone loves recognition. something that we really like to do when we can meet in person at the State House for our award ceremony is connecting those lawmakers with the people who are utilizing the programs that they're funding or that they're creating. There's a nice picture from I think this is my first year or my second year of all of the winners we have. And there's plenty of ways for all of you to support the program. Just talking about it is a great thing. If you have ideas when you're driving around, if you see some great piece of sustainability, you hear about it, send me an email. Let me know about it. I'll investigate and see if I can wrangle up a nomination for them. And I know our jurors, they enjoy seeing work from all around. It's definitely something that lifts your spirits up, especially in the middle of November. If we have in-person ceremonies, we love to have people help us load in and load out. You can also sponsor the program or the event. So again, that's the end of my presentation. I will stop sharing. I know I spoke kind of fast, but I'm open to any questions. Well, perfect.
Thanks
That means
so
I
much.
explained everything.
It's exciting. Maybe next year we'll be able to do in person if it's safe, who knows, but I did think the virtual worked well last year, so looking forward to that again.
Yep, and Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen is asking in the chat, can you get the awards email?
There you go.
Yes, and I agree, Mary Ellen. Yeah, as said, suggested that even when we can return to in-person, maybe continuing to offer some kind of virtual option, hybrid meeting, that would be good. I know that a lot of organizations that moved to live streaming during the pandemic have decided they're going to keep the live streaming going even after they return to in-person. So if there's a way to do that, I endorse that, Mary Ellen. That's a great idea.
So again, that's a way you can help. That's a totally
Alright.
different skill set, different volunteers, different resources. If you know people who do that, send them on over.
Mhm.
Thanks, Julia.
Great.
So we are really just about out of time here. So I'm just gonna share my screen again real quick. And tell people just real briefly about some of our plans for 2022. So we plan on continuing to build on the work we're doing with communities around climate and sustainability. We've been having such great success with that. And we've had more and more communities call us up and say, how can we do something like this? So that's exciting. We're going to continue working with Cassie at the Resilient Iowa Communities Program. As we mentioned, we're starting this webinar series for city staff and planners. We've done 2 already. The 3rd one is February 2nd, and we've got plans for several others throughout the year. And then our newest campaign, and you kind of heard this a little bit with both Cassie and Allison, is that when, a lot of communities are starting to think about climate, but one of the things that we've noticed here in Iowa, but it's also been noticed nationally, is that comprehensive plans and often a lot of transportation plans aren't quite keeping up with, they don't necessarily reflect the climate goals that are happening. And even in climate action plans, the transportation piece often is very heavy on EV vehicles and often leaves out the different land use, practices that can reduce the demand for vehicles and reduce vehicle miles traveled. So we're really wanting to spend some time. We are currently raising some funds. We think we might have some coming in fairly soon that we can choose a handful of communities, do some deep dives into the comprehensive plans and transportation plans, and really start looking at where we can help communities to make modifications. And eliminating urban sprawl is one of the biggest pieces to that. And reducing, like I said, reducing the demand for vehicles altogether, rather than just looking at going to EV vehicles. So that is kind of a big focus for 2022. And then, as I mentioned, as you've heard, we have a few upcoming events. January 27th, again, is the Best Development Awards ceremony. February 2nd is our Comprehensive Planning Through a Climate Lens webinar. And then in April, we're working on nailing down the date, but we are going to be doing a sustainability tour in the city of Perry. There's some pretty exciting things that have been happening there, and they are now the first city in Iowa whose city government is currently 100% renewable. The government facilities in the city are, so that's pretty exciting. So that's it for those updates, and Laura, I'll hand it back to you to close things out.
Okay, well, thanks to everyone for making time, and I really enjoyed the discussion, and especially to our speakers. I hope people do feel free to reach out to the speakers. They do want to hear from you. If you have ideas, if you know people, I think it is very important, having a personal connection to a city administrator or a city planner is better than just cold calling someone. So having someone to help make that introduction is great, and keeping your eye out for those Best Development Awards. So thank you so much to Carrie for all the time you spent planning this event. And feel free, obviously, to reach out to Carrie or to me or to anybody with questions going forward. But anyway, it's nice to see old friends on the screen. So we'll hope for next year being able to be in person again. But as Mary Ellen said, maybe keeping kind of a live stream option would be a nice thing if there's a way to technically make that work. So I don't think we formally need a motion to adjourn. Thank you.